Alrighty, the video for today is going to be about the city of Columbus and the Columbus Division of Police Chief, Thomas Quinlan. Thomas Quinlan served as chief of police for less than 1 year in the city of Columbus before he was asked to step down by the Columbus mayor, Andrew Ginther. It's my estimation that the reason he was asked to step down is because, well, he was railroaded by the mayor for no reason other than the mayor's own political gain. All right, as I mentioned before, this video is going to be about former police chief of Columbus, Ohio, Thomas Quinlan. What brought this up? What made this pop into my head? Well, it's right here. I was thumbing through YouTube the other day, and in my recommended section, this video popped up. It said, retraction, Columbus PD lawsuit correction. I was curious about this because I know a lot about Columbus Police Department. I interact a lot with the Columbus Police Department. I consider myself an expert, and I had not heard about a new lawsuit involving the Columbus Division of Police. So I clicked on the video. This channel is, let's see, it's called Indisputable with Dr. Rashad Ritchie. I watched this video for just a moment, and I was able to determine that this guy is an internet hack and a race baiting clown. It's bad. I'm going to let you see what I saw, at least the first part of the video. We'll talk about it and kind of go from there.
It was, however, former Chief Thomas Quinlan who was in charge at the time of the incident in question. Take a good look at him. This is a 30-year veteran. He was chief from February 9th, 2019 to January 28th, 2021, short stint, and was viewed with divided opinions by the community. I'm going to get into that. Let's keep his picture up. He had not even ended his probationary period as chief before he was forced to resign, and was then demoted to deputy chief because of his failure to meet the needs of city leadership and the community.
Alrighty, if you watch that little clip, you would think that former chief of police Thomas Quinlan must be some kind of piece of shit. I mean, what a piece of work. He didn't even make it through his probationary period. How bad of a chief do you have to be to fail that hard? You know, he just got the job. Well, this guy, he said a couple of things wrong. He wasn't the chief from February 2019 until January 2021. He was the chief from December 2019 to January 2021. That's significant. There's a lot of months in there. Plus, if he had been the chief in February, his probation would have started in February of 2019. And in early 2020, his probation would have been over and he would have been named the actual chief of police, and he would have remained in that position. When you're on probation, that gives the city the opportunity to fire you without cause. Once you last past your probation, it becomes a lot more difficult to fire a chief of police. Basically, when you are in that probationary period, you can make up whatever reason you want and you can fire somebody. So where did all that information come from that he was saying? Well, it came from the mayor of the city of Columbus. Let's hear what he had to say.
It became clear to me that Chief Quinlan could not successfully implement the reform and change I expect and that the community demands. Columbus residents have lost faith in him and in the division's ability to change on its own. Chief Quinlan understood. He agreed to step back so the city can move forward.
Alrighty, so what did the mayor say? The mayor said, it became clear to me that Chief Quinlan could not successfully implement the reforms that I and the community demand. Well, let's think about what was going on when Chief Quinlan was the chief of police. He was named chief of police in December of 2019. If you remember correctly, that's the end of 2019. 2020 came very soon after. What happened in 2020? Was there anything significant that happened that year? I remember in March of 2020, a little something called COVID-19 came on the scene. COVID-19 made everybody take everything that they were doing, set it aside and address COVID-19. Police work was absolutely no different. And as the chief of police, his main function now became trying to figure out how we were going to operate a police department in this pandemic environment. If you remember early on in the COVID-19 era, everybody was terrified. Nobody knew exactly what this illness was going to do to our population. We were afraid that half of us might die. And conservatively, we were told that it might be 10 to 20%. As the chief of police, and you're looking at, even if as many officers don't die, you're looking at possibly hospitalization of half of your workforce. The chief of police had to put all of his efforts into looking at contingency plans and tracking this stuff and being on top of it. I would say that everyone who experienced 2020 and especially the early months of COVID-19 would understand that. It's incredibly difficult to implement reforms when you have to put everything aside and focus on COVID-19, just like the mayor and every other public official had to do. Then not too long after that, when the nation started to get a grip on COVID-19, we had these riots that swept the country, including the city of Columbus. So now you have a chief of police who's worried about his workforce being diminished by a pandemic. And he's also got thousands of people who took to the streets and started smashing windows and lighting buildings on fire, stopping motorists, beating them in the streets, and laying siege to the state capitol, which is in the center of the city of Columbus. So the chief of police then had to refocus all of his efforts into this riot control situation and everything that came with that. I think I even have a picture of him right here. Chief Quinlan, to my knowledge, did everything that was asked of him by the city. He went out and he marched with the protesters, met with them, made adjustments to police tactics based on what was going on down there. There was a lot going on at that time that might have distracted the chief's attention away from your police reforms. I want to point something else out. This was a public release done by the safety director's office. This was in response to Officer Mitchell's trial, where he murdered a prostitute while doing a vice operation. His trial was a mistrial, but he's due for another trial, and I'm hoping that the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office, under the direction of TIAC, can get their heads together and properly handle this case. But regardless of the fact, this was a statement that was released and then later deleted, but I got a screenshot of it. It says, "The Columbus Division of Police abolished the Vice Unit in 2019 in the wake of this tragedy and concerning lapses in accountability that came to light." It talks about how they changed the Vice team to a PAC team. They overhauled their operations. They're making them audio and video record everything that they do. They no longer work solo. They work in teams. There has to be a supervisor on site at all times. There has to be uniformed cruisers nearby. They're not worried so much about enforcement, but they're trying to get these people into not training, but different programs to help them break the cycle. They're viewing these women as victims rather than criminals. All of these things are things that I would consider reforms. And who's the person that ushered in those reforms? None other than Chief Thomas Quinlan. Here he is, as a quote from him in the news, said the Columbus Police Vice Unit is being abolished, and the city's top cop said vice-related crimes will be addressed using a community-centered approach. If you ask me, that sounds like police reform that's being implemented by Chief Thomas Quinlan. Now, I want to direct your attention to another video from Dr. Rashad Dumbass. And I think it's hilarious. You'll see why in a moment. But what he's going to do is he's going to draw a case and he's going to bring something up and he's going to say, look, this is the reason that Thomas Quinlan was a bad guy and that he was reluctant to reform and that he needed to be replaced. I want you to pay attention to the case that he uses, and I'm going to give you a little background on that as soon as we're done.
An investigation into this chief and his efforts and attitude with certain reforms were clearly not in line with the public's expectations of police reform. In recent news, former Columbus Vice Officer Stephen Rosser was sentenced to 18 months in prison for doing what? Depriving a victim's civil rights. A jury found this man right here guilty of conspiracy to violate an individual's civil rights. February.
So there you have it, folks. This guy, Rashad, Dr. Rashad, whatever, he's saying that, listen, this is proof that Chief Thomas Quinlan was a bad guy. He didn't know how to handle the job. He was reluctant to reform. Here he is, Tom Quinlan. He's an asshole. And the reason he's an asshole is because this guy was charged and convicted in felony court of violating someone's civil rights. Well, here's a little secret, Dr. Rashad, that you are not aware of, but you're going to feel kind of stupid afterwards. Stephen Rosser, right here, former vice detective. Tom Quinlan. Tom Quinlan is the one that made sure Stephen Rosser was reported to the FBI and charged in federal court. If it wasn't for the actions of Chief Tom Quinlan, Steve Rosser would not have been charged in federal court. Do you understand what that means? Steve Rosser did not commit these crimes because of Thomas Quinlan. Thomas Quinlan made sure that Steve Rosser is being held accountable. That is exactly what we want, right? Like, if you're the type of person who's demanding police reform, Thomas Quinlan is the absolute guy that you were looking for. I've talked to a lot of officers with the Columbus Division of Police. I've asked them their opinion of Tom Quinlan. Tom Quinlan has a reputation for being a heavy disciplinarian when it comes to officers that he feels did not do the right thing. As soon as the Coy shooting happened, he fired Officer Coy, who shot that unarmed black man in December of 2019. He made sure that Stephen Rosser was fired and brought up on federal charges. If you ask officers around the Division of Police their opinion of Quinlan when he was chief, they'll tell you that he was just a yes man for the mayor, that he went along with everything that the mayor had to say. I don't know if that's warranted or not. I was never in the room with Chief Quinlan and the mayor at the same time. I don't know how those conversations went, but I can tell you that's what his reputation was amongst the officers of the Division of Police.
It became clear to me.
So he had a reputation of being a yes man to the mayor. And then the mayor comes out and gives this statement that said, it became clear to me that he was not capable of implementing these reforms. He was not capable of implementing these reforms because he had a lot on his plate that prevented him from doing so. On top of that, the mayor right here called in the Department of Justice to investigate the police department. That might keep the chief of police busy for a little bit. Hired multiple outside law firms. Baker Hostetler paid them over $500,000 to investigate uses of force by the police department that occurred as a result of the riots downtown. The city also hired a special prosecutor to bring charges on 3 police officers who were eventually found not guilty and had their cases dismissed. And the special prosecutor ended up quitting before the last case even went to trial because she was an embarrassment. These were all things that were outside of the chief's control, but he handled them as best he could while still trying to implement, quote unquote, the reforms that the mayor asked for. Instead, the mayor just decided to throw him under the bus. The reason he threw him under the bus, in my estimation, is for his own political gain, because he wanted to make sure that the chief of police came from an outside agency. And I also feel strongly that there was a racial component to that decision. And I'm willing to make that statement based on words that you're going to see next from another member of City Council as he spoke about the racial makeup of the leadership staff of the Columbus Division of Police.
It's of utmost importance that we change the look of the department. The chief knows this. I've had conversations. I know he's committed to it. But when we have every deputy chief that is all Caucasian, and we finally just got a woman to add just a smidge of diversity to the leadership within the police department, we've got a lot of work to do. And I'm looking forward to contributing as an elected official and leading in that regard. So thank you all for your time today.
When you're in the position that Tom Quinlan found himself in, where you have been a honorable police officer for over 30 years, you've climbed up the ranks, you were a sergeant, a lieutenant, a commander, a deputy chief, and then you made it to chief of police. When you retire, even if you didn't make it to chief of police, these guys that work for these large agencies, when they make it up to the level, sometimes even lieutenant, but commander and deputy chief for sure, when they retire from their current job, they very frequently look for jobs in other smaller departments. This is where small departments generally get their chiefs of police from. In a case like Thomas Quinlan, he was definitely looking at a possible second career as a chief of police in some smaller community where he can maybe kick his feet up a little bit and relax after having worked for such a large city for such a long period of time. The words and the actions that the mayor took have serious probability of damaging his future employment prospects. It's sad that that happened to such a person for no purpose other than local politics. You should not be willing to throw someone under the bus that hard to snowball their future employment possibilities for your short-term political gain. I think those are going to be my thoughts for today. Thank you for watching. I'll talk to you soon.